All right, everybody, this is John, and today we're going to be talking about cycles, the upcoming key cycle dates, and why they are important to know. So, the last cycle date that came up for the SPX was 8th through the 10th, which was right in here, and you can see we did get the drop in on the 10th. And now the question remains is what happens next? So, the way this one is planned out or playing out is that it should see a follow through decline of possibly greater magnitude, um, but there's no sign of that happening yet. So this is something that can happen up to the first week in November. Now, I've seen one thing I've noticed with cycles in the stock market is that you'll get, oh, here's a cycle high, and you get like a 2-day sell-off, and then we're off and running to new highs again. So the market is it's super strong, and we don't want to deny that. And when I'm looking at this daily chart, I'm seeing this amazing squeeze, and I'm looking at this 30-minute chart, and I see this amazing squeeze. So, and I look at something like this, I think we could actually very well make new highs first, and then possibly we get a flush a little bit later. So, as of right now, I would say that this is not a no-brainer as to what's going to happen, what comes next, so to speak. But we did get the flush, and there's supposed to be a follow through at this point decline. And let me make sure I've got the dates right on this. Okay, so basically a second decline, and it's got a wider window, but it's into the kind of the late October, early November. So I think we could get something here where we get even a potentially breakout to new highs, but then just kind of keep in mind that that's looming on the horizon. Okay, so that applies equally to the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, and then typically what will happen on something like this too is that there will be other indexes that mirror this a little more closely. And one that's responded very well to these cycles is the mid-cap 400. So this is what you can see we got on the 10th. And of course, we're kind of following along here, not quite as strong, but this is a good one to keep an eye on for any potential. So anyway, as of right now, October 21st, right now we're bid. There's no signs that the market wants to roll over, but just keep in mind in terms of these cycles, we got the drop on October 10th, and then the next one shows a another sell-off and possibly a lower low into the late October, early November. So that's kind of a vaguer window this time around, but that's what we got to work with. Okay, so for the bond market, now if you don't trade bonds, this is a 30-year bond. The common one is a 30-year bond. You got 10-year notes, and really this can be summed up with TLT, which we'll take a look at. So what's going on here now is this market goes up, interest rates come down, so that's good. But the question is there any timing coming up into this? And so we do have basically on track to rally into the first week of November. Okay, again, today's October 21st, so look for kind of a rally into the first week of November. And the idea with that is if you're long, you hold on to that. Kind of take profits. And again, these cycles can be a little odd because it's like, well, first week in November, what's the price target? Not necessarily a price target there. It's just that when you get same thing as here is when you get something where you kind of get this abrupt end and some consolidation, it typically coincides with cycles. In this case, we've got first week in November. Usually it's a little more precise within 2 or 3 days. But at this point, you essentially keep buying pullbacks until you get that first week in November, and then look to take profits, or if you're contrarian, if you want to sell some call credit spreads, etc., etc. All right, so for the euro, which is the opposite of the dollar, the way it is shaping up here kind of too, and we're kind of seeing that last week of October, first week of November is kind of a key area for a lot of these markets. Looking for a low to hit here, likely around 113.50 to 114.50, around that last week in October, first week in November, and then from there a decent bounce. So this is one, if you play the currencies, short the euro, that would be the play here for the next several weeks. All right, so for Bitcoin, it did reach its kind of upper target zones within its window, has been selling off, and so the question is what happens from here? Well, with Bitcoin, we're kind of coming into a 4-year cycle progression that peaks in Q4 of 2025. So just kind of keep in mind that this is a zone where it's likely Bitcoin camps out, doesn't eclipse this level for quite some time. This is something that I'm going to continue to watch, but at this point, it does have kind of these 4-year benchmarks. We'll talk about that in more detail in the future here, but let's actually take a quick look at this. All right, so on this chart, it doesn't go back as far as I would like, but if you look at 4 years ago, so again, there's this kind of 4-year cycle here in Bitcoin. So this is 25. So if we look at Q4 of 21, or here we go, which is right around here. And if you look up here, you can see we rallied into that, and then from there we actually had a pretty decent decline. Now this time around, is that something? Are we going to get some kind of decent decline like that? Look, it's too early to tell. Look, I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin. I'm also a huge fan of cycles, so I'm looking at both here. The interesting thing about Bitcoin is that there's a lot of money being loaned against Bitcoin right now, and the stop loss, like the margin call for that, is right here about $80,000. So what happens is, let's say you have $100,000 in Bitcoin. They'll loan you, $60,000 against it, whatever it is. Or more, but then at some point it's like, well, if this thing falls by 25%, we're going to start selling it to cover this, just to make sure that there's plenty of cushion we can get paid. So what I'm interested in here is bigger picture. If it's true we're going to get this 4-year cycle, kind of a little bit of a high here in Bitcoin that gives it a pause and a pullback, that could create an interesting flood of selling. Again, this is all too early, but that's just something to keep an eye on should we start to see something here in Bitcoin. The bottom line on something like that, if that's something that happens, remember this was over the course of a couple of years, it would ultimately be a fantastic buying opportunity. That's a lot of ifs, whens, and maybes. So there's nothing right now that I'm taking action on that, but it's something to keep in mind because it's obviously a super important thing. All right, so what about gold? Gold has this thing about October. My voice just went out. October and April. So these are kind of 6-month degrees from each other. And a lot of times when you look at that, and it's harder to see here on a monthly chart, let's look at a weekly chart. And if you look at, if we go over here to October of 2024, you can see it kind of peaked and sold off. And then if you look at April, a lot of times, that's oftentimes an important reversal kind of in April. And it can be kind of loosey-goosey as these things are, but what's interesting about this is that, it's like, okay, like October, we sold off into October here, and then we were able to bounce, and then we rallied into April, and then we sold off from there. So these April, October, it just happens over and over and over again. And so now we've rallied into kind of mid to late October, and we're starting to sell off, and yeah, we may get a little bit of back and forth here, but I would anticipate that this is a longer high that's set in place. So just be careful about buying the dip. We can go back and look at more of these, just October, Aprils, and things like that. So in this case, we bottomed out in October, rallied into April, okay, and then we sold off and bottomed in October. So essentially those months, whatever, and then we rallied into April and then we kind of sold off, right? And this happens, it's like this weird 6-month kind of a cycle that happens. So let's come and look at this. Okay, here we go, April. So we rallied into April, peaked in April, sold off into October, right? And here's another one. Sell, 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 sell. When did we bottom? Oh my God, April. And then we October was kind of nothing. We did rally in October, and then we kind of died. And then, so anyway, you get the gist, right? And so that's kind of, these are like these bigger things that play out here with those months. And here you can see we kind of sold off into April, bottomed, rallied into October, and then just kind of died from there, give or take. So anyway, just beware that we are in an area with gold and silver where whatever trend had been happening kind of just ends for a bit. And now, do we sell off into April? I think that's a stretch, but could we calm down for a little bit? I think absolutely so. And then someone asked about kind of the cycle in crude oil here. Is there anything coming up? So crude oil was set for kind of a multi-week high in late September. Again, this is a weekly chart here. So you look at like late September, give or take. And now we've been selling off. So the question is are we set to bottom anytime soon? Again, based on cycles. And the answer is no. At this point, it could just kind of keep drifting down into January. Now, in terms of a target, we're honestly kind of close to where that target could be, but you're looking at like 52, 55, anything like that. So likely just kind of drifting here for a bit, but I'm not looking, again, according to the cycles, not looking for anything super exciting anytime soon in crude oil to the upside. All right, so that's what we have for cycle updates. I'm also going to do kind of a bigger picture outlook that talks more about macro trends, money flows, which assets are getting money flows, which ones are not getting money flows, and we'll look at that as an update here in the near future. Otherwise, hopefully the cycles kind of give you a kind of a good idea of kind of the ebbs and flows that can happen in the market that don't necessarily make any sense. All right, everybody have good trading, and we'll see you at the next one.
Hey, John here with Simpler Trading. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, comment down below and let us know what topic you want to see us cover next. Also, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you can get notified when we release new videos. And if you want to watch us trade in real time using our own money, go to simplertrading.com and learn how to sign up. Good trading, and we'll see you next time.